views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to the transformative show, We Carry the Light, with host Dr. Susan Allison, the show that inspires you to find the light within and shine your light in the world. Who are you right now? And who do you want to be? What is it that makes you happy, helps you feel fulfilled, and living your purpose? Tune in and let Dr. Susan help you discover that you carry the unique light that only you can shine. Now, here is your host, Dr. Susan Allison.
Hi, everyone. And I was just saying to my guest, I need to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and in all the languages of the world, since this is a world network that we're on. So hello, everyone. This is the show, We Carry the Light, and I am Dr. Susan. I'm so happy you're here, either live or listening to the archive show. And don't forget, you can go to transformationtalkradio.com and listen to all my archive shows. Just go to my host page and you can listen to them or download them as a podcast. So I hope your week is going well. I always ask you about how you're doing. And this time I'm asking if you are living the life you want. I've been thinking a lot about that this week, whether I'm living the life of my dreams or if I'm doing some things that really no longer serve me. And I'm wondering that about you. So maybe think about that right now. So for me, some of the things are part of the old me. They're my old story. I used to do just about everything to please my father and then my first husband and society and so on, rather than always doing what I truly felt inspired to do from inside me. I was the epitome of the good girl. In fact, I wrote a poem called Good Girl, wanting everyone's approval and love instead of really loving myself and doing what I love. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but that's been part of my story. I used to be a teacher, and I was a good one, according to my students. I loved my students. I was of service to them, loved teaching literature. Then I became a therapist, and I'm still seeing clients part-time and feel that my therapy practice and working with people is still right for me. At the same time, I'm also an artist, poet, songwriter, painter, who's just in the past few years been birthing this part of myself. When I feel the most alive, I realize, and I feel the happiest and most uplifted, is when I am in the middle of creating something, especially when a song is coming. I even call these songs divine downloads because they really pour into my head. I wrote a poem recently called Saved, and I said that they pour in like honey from divine bees. So this honey just pours in. All the lyrics, the melody is done when it comes in. It feels like a miracle, and it's such a creative process and makes me really happy. Also, when I'm writing a book, and most of you know I have a book coming out in the fall, my 5th book, and when I'm in the process of writing it and coming up with the ideas, I am so happy. So I guess if I rewrote my life story in the present, it would have a title like maybe Rebirth or Divine Honey or maybe Blossoming, because this is what I feel is happening to me in my life right now. And I hope you know, and you will after hearing our guest today, that you can write your own story. You can write a new story. You can reframe it. You can then live authentically as the person, as the main character that you truly are in your new story. So, as I mentioned about a guest, we are blessed to have Kim Schneiderman with us today, who's the author of Step Out of Your Story, Writing Exercises to Reframe and Transform Your Life. Kim counsels in private practice and teaches as a professor and guest lecturer at venues including New York University. She also writes a bi-weekly advice column for Metro newspapers and blogs for Psychology Today. You can visit her at stepoutofyourstory.com. So welcome, Kim. I'm so glad you're here.
Me.
Good. I always like to start with the personal, and I really enjoyed your preface and enjoyed your whole book. But I wonder if you could tell us a bit of your story that led up to the writing of this book and why you wrote this book, Step Out of Your Story.
Sure. I've been asked that many times. It's always a hard story to tell because there wasn't a particular event or inspiration of how it came to be. Let's see. So the short story is that I wasn't, I was a very imaginative kid, and I used to imagine, and I used to read a lot, and I sort of imagined myself as sort of a character in a novel. I had this alter ego called Kim Schneiderman. I have no idea why I chose that particular name for my alter ego, but it was just sort of a childhood perspective that I had that I didn't really think much about. But as I got older and sort of became more spiritually oriented, I started to ask myself, like, when things would happen to me, I would say to myself, like, if I were a character in a story, how would I want the character to grow and evolve through the situation? Or how would why would a benevolent author place the situation in my life? What actions or outcomes, if I were reading about my story in a novel or watching a film, like, what actions or outcomes would I root for? And in 2008, I developed kind of a series. I was an English major in college and a freelance. I was a journalist for 5 years, full time, and I was just always interested in the way character development and the way people tell their stories. And I was always sort of thought it was interesting that when people would engage in discussions about what the character, if we were talking about literature, when people would talk about what was the character's motivation, I felt like when they would explain, it was sort of, they would be really sort of talking about themselves in a disguised way. I thought isn't that interesting that third person sort of allows people to talk about themselves in a way that feels safer, and that became sort of the inspiration for creating a series of writing exercises in the third person narrative. And I started offering it in 2008. I was working working as a therapist in private practice, but also for the Jewish Board of Family Services in New York that was creating programs for people who had been impacted by the recession. And it kind of struck me that so many people were feeling really devastated because they had been defining themselves through the roles they played, whether they were, they thought if they were the stockbroker or they were the, finance manager. And my writing workshops were aimed at helping them see sort of the larger narrative of their life story, that they weren't they weren't just defined by the roles that they were playing, that their story was much larger, and I was also helping them to see themselves as this chapter in their life as an important part of their character's evolution, and helping them to see how they could take charge of their story by looking at ways that they could work on themselves, regardless of whether or not they had a job at the moment. So that was sort of where it started. And then, as I explained in the preface of my story, of my book, I personally went through a number of difficult, challenging situations. I lost my mother 10 years ago to ovarian cancer after she had it for 11 years. And then my father got married. He met somebody that we really grew to love, and she also developed cancer and passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and then my father, my father actually developed a terminal cancer, and I ended up becoming his caregiver. And I had to really ask myself, after all of these challenging situations, could I see the larger story of my life and find the redemptive narrative and feel empowered in the same way that I was sort of asking of my students. And what I discovered is that I could, but I sort of had to read between the lines of my story. And going back, like my father had been sort of the childhood antagonist of my story. We butted heads a lot, and he was a good man. I mean, he meant well, but he could also be, he had a sort of the I told you so. If I asked why or what, he kind of would always say, but it's because I told you so. So it was a hard relationship, and I had kind of made my mother my confidant and gotten closer to her. But when she passed, my father, I was kind of like, okay, no, now I have to work on this relationship with my father because he's the only one I have left. And we got a lot closer after she died, but it wasn't really until I became his caregiver that I had to give up my practice. My father had just moved to Florida, and I was up in New York, and he needed a hospice home caregiver, and it was really, I was the logical choice. So I gave up my private practice temporarily and went down there and spent, several months living with him and taking care of him. And we hadn't lived together since I was 18, and here I am in my early 40s, and I'm thrust into this situation of becoming, a middle-aged orphan. And I didn't, I'm not married. I don't have any children. And so this is bringing up a lot of stuff for me. It was really scary, and it was not the story that I wanted. It wasn't the story that I wanted to live in my life. It was not how I had imagined my story would evolve. And I had to let that go because, I really had to say, I had to let that go because that wasn't what was happening. How I'd envisioned my father walking me down the aisle or being married at a certain age, all those things weren't happening. And so, but when I was able to let that go, what I discovered is that I was present for this incredible healing experience between me and my dad. That during those months of caring for him, we got to really know each other on a much deeper level. And to the point that a few weeks before he died, he said, I can't believe that I'm still learning and growing, which is not something my father would normally say. And I said, what do you mean by that, Dad? And he said, I'm amazed that people have found a way to love me, and then I found a way to love them.
Wow.
And that was, for me, just a moment that I will always remember. And it really changes the way that I think about the story of losing my parents, because there was I look at it as a healing story. It was very redemptive for me. It changed me in ways that maybe wouldn't have happened if I had the story. If I had lived the life that I wanted, maybe, which it might not have happened that way, because what I ended up getting, kind of like the Rolling Stones song says, is sort of the experience that maybe I needed. And so, which goes to my point that, sometimes you can read your life as a tragedy, or you can read it as an adventure. It really all depends on, how you choose to use the power of interpretation to read your, to read your story. And for me, I see it as a story. My book is about looking at your life as a personal growth adventure and really valuing those experiences that build our character the same way that we value them in the stories that we like to watch on TV or in the movies or read in a book.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful, and I want to talk about that more when we come back. We need to take a break. We'll be back with Kim Schneiderman and teaching you to step out of your story.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.
Tune in to The Jen Royster Show, intuitive guidance to inspire your life, each Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. This amazing show is an inspirational hour that will take you on an epic metaphysical journey to discover the spiritual approach to life's greatest challenges. Dr. Jen is an internationally known intuitive counselor, spiritual teacher, and energy healer. Call in for intuitive readings and visit JenRoyster.com for more information.
Wondering how to play the game of life and actually win? Stop wondering and start winning the game of life with the unique, incomparable Lynn Brown. Lynn's powerful transferable tools stem from her success in the very competitive world of sports and business.
Since Lynn was one of the top athletes in the United States, she understands really well about the athlete's mind, their challenges, and what athletes need. I have confidence to ask Lynn to take care of my professional team just because of Lynn, her passion, and the power she has.
Lynn is passionate about working with kids and with athletes. Her life is a testament to the incredible power of intention to create miracles. Lynn is dedicated to assisting and inspiring leaders with the vision and tools to realize their dreams.
And she wants to help you next. Enhance your overall performance and the ability to reach your goals. Bring your game face on. Visit letter R, letter U, intuit.com or call 844 letter B, Intuit.
What does a Dentist of the Year get? A little plaque. Welcome to Smile Big, where we offer cosmetic, restorative, and preventative dentistry. Dr. James Rosenwald and Dr. Susan Abdenur work hard every day for their clients to be happy to smile with the latest equipment for complete smile restoration for anyone. The sooner you call, the sooner they can help. Call 425-454-4040 or email scheduling@smilebig.com. You can even visit our website at smilebig.com.
How would you like increased health and vitality? How would you like to avoid the onset of disease as well as slow the aging process? This is all possible through a simple, safe, and natural process. Every day we are either moving toward wellness or away from wellness.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Mack. I'd like to be your partner in achieving optimal health. Contact me now at maryjanemack.com or call 425-392-0659. Visit maryjanemack.com.
Artie Hoffman is the hottest psychic with the warmest heart and the host of the hit show Angels and Answers. A renowned psychic, medium, spiritual life coach, and an entertaining motivational speaker, Artie has helped over 15,000 people with his amazing intuitive gifts, his passion, and his humor. Call 877-ANGEL-02 to schedule a personal reading or to have your own psychic Artie party. That's 877-ANGEL-02. And visit artiehoffman.com and Angels and Answers on Facebook.
Wrapped up like a deuce, another runner in the night, blinded by the light.
Welcome back, everyone, to We Carry the Light, and I'm so glad Benny's playing that song. I hope he plays it all the time when I have my show on Thursdays.
You know I will. You know
I love that song, Blinded by the Light, except I find myself kind of dancing here because I do the show standing up.
You don't have to stop. Keep going. No.
I have to kind of stand still because I have my guests and I need to continue here. But anyway, thank you for playing that. So this is We Carry the Light, and my guest is Kim Schneiderman, who is the author of Step Out of Your Story. And we've been talking about her own story, her own experiences in her life. And I wanted to read a quote just to segue into this next part that's from her preface. She said, "After experiencing so many devastating losses, I had to ask myself, could I walk my talk? Did I truly believe I had the power to transform my tragedies into triumphs simply by choosing to widen the lens through which I viewed my own story?" So, Kim, I love that passage. I circled it.
Mm-hmm.
And would love you to talk about stepping out of the story, whether you want to talk about it, how you did it would be fine, or how you suggest readers do it in your book.
Sure. So when I talk about widening the lens, what I'm really talking about is seeing my life, seeing the lens through which I look at my life as a personal growth adventure. And what that means is, there's two ways, there's many ways to tell a story. And for example, you could look at The Wizard of Oz, which is a classic story that everybody knows, and you can look at it as here's this girl who has these horrible things happen to her. Her neighbor kidnaps her dog, and and then she ends up running away and gets hit on the head and gets swept up in a tornado, and she has this nasty witch chasing her, and all along she had the power to go home, and she should never have left in the first place. Why did she leave? This whole thing, and you could read the story of the Wizard of Oz that way. Yeah. Or you could look at it as here was someone who had a longing, and she didn't exactly know her own strengths or have an understanding of what the power of love was until she went on this adventure where she ended up sort of returning to kind of own her own story in a much stronger way, right? She ended up like through the power of friendship and just finding her own strength, and how her transformation sort of inspired the transformation of all the other characters in her story. So there's many ways to read a story, and one of the ways that I help readers widen their lens, I use two, like, let me just go back a second. So, so we all understand on some intuitive level that every life is an unfolding story. We understand that it's this unique and unpredictable, dynamic, unfolding story that's open to interpretation, especially our own. However, we often don't stop to really take a look at and ask ourselves, like, who is this character I'm playing? What does he or she want? Who's writing my script? Or how can this, the challenges that we face help us develop the tools and insights we need to move to the next chapter? And the reason that we don't always stop to do that is because when we're immersed in something like, a crisis, for example, or anything that's challenging us to use, I call them emotional or spiritual or mental muscles that we don't already possess. Yeah. It's hard to step out of our stories and look at things from like a broader, elevated perspective. So what I do is I provide readers with a technique and a framework. And a technique are writing exercises in the third-person narrative. And for people that don't remember what that means, it's basically writing about yourself as if you were narrating your own story from a he or a she perspective. And it sounds like something like a very subtle shift, but it actually can really liberate you just writing in that way to access parts of yourself and your narrative that might be sort of hiding or otherwise hiding. In fact, there's a growing body of research that shows that viewing yourself through the lens, when people view themselves through the lens of the third-person narrative, they tend to see themselves much more compassionately.
Yes.
And actually, like, when they look back at their lives, they often will describe themselves as having overcome obstacles, as opposed to people, the control group in these studies, when they ask them to talk about themselves in the first person, they tend to get stuck in more of the victim story. So they're actually finding, and there was a big article in Psychology Today on the cover of the June issue about how actually talking to ourselves in the third person is this like much more constructive way to talk to ourselves. And so what I have people do is I have them write about themselves in the third person. And it's kind of like, I call it the sneaky perspective, because you're kind of fooling your censoring ego into thinking that you're writing about somebody else when you're actually writing about yourself. And again, like my students, when I've taught workshops, they're like, really? This like little shift is going to make a big difference? And they are always amazed at how much it does.
You know what I noticed, because I went through your book. I read every book that, of my guests, and I've been on shows where people don't do that. But I read every book, and so I did all the exercises. And you know what I noticed, Kim, is that I had more compassion and more love for this person and kindness and gentleness towards her that really isn't always there when I am thinking about myself as I.
Right. Isn't it amazing how that works?
Amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. So the second thing I do is I offer like a step-by-step process for people to walk themselves. I basically help people walk themselves through a story. So what I do is I have them first start in the present moment, because the way I look at it, because sometimes people want to, where should I start exploring my story? Should I go back in time? Should I go, into the present? And I like to start in the present because that's when the protagonist of your story, who is you, has an opportunity to change your life, right? So I have them focus on what is the current chapter of your life. In fact, I have one of my exercises is describe, if your life were a novel, what would be the title of the current chapter, and how would you summarize it? And I have them in 8 to 10 sentences, And I have them do that in the third person. But then I have them, if people can recall the story arc, it's like the classic elements of the story. There's a protagonist trying to accomplish something, and then there's there's an antagonist that gets in the way, and the protagonist has to respond. How the protagonist responds to the challenges in the story determine how he or she evolves. Mm-hmm. So simply put, there's a conflict in every story, right? And that conflict is, and I defined it is about ways that you're feeling challenged in your life. So it could be something like you could be going through a difficult situation like I went through with my father of having to be a caregiver and, confronting the mortality of someone you love. That's, one particular challenge. But it could also be something really, amazing that's happening to you. Like, for example, writing this book has been, and you were talking about, I think when you opened the show, about this chapter called Blossoming.
Yes.
So you can, even through the chapter of Blossoming, I'm sure that there are ways that you are stretching and growing as a person.
Absolutely.
And so what my exercises do is they use a variety of, creative questions that help people sort of tap into, well, what is this, what's the theme of this chapter? And how, if I have a particular, sometimes we have recurring characters that show up in our story in different guises, the boss who never appreciates our contributions, or it might be, or the father figure who never appreciated we have the same character that keeps showing up in our story.
That's
so
right.
I have people sort of like identify with their antagonist, what the antagonist is, who is the antagonist, what it might be trying to teach the protagonist.
Yes.
Being you. And then I have them do like really creative dialogues, like by identifying, like, I talk about the antagonist of your story as your personal trainer. Mm-hmm. And your the writing exercises as your character development workout. Mm-hmm. So like, how is your, we might think sometimes when we're challenged that we're like, why do we have to, we might want to prefer the low impact routine, right?
Yes.
Like when we go to the gym, sometimes we just like want things to be maybe, sometimes it's actually easier when we go to the gym. We understand that we have to kind of work hard to get to build those muscles. But it's the same thing in life. Like, we might not always appreciate that in life when we feel challenged. There's really an opportunity for us to develop our underutilized emotional or mental or spiritual muscles. For example, for example, your response when you're facing uncertainty might be to have to go into a fear mode.
Yeah.
Right. So what I do is I have people, have a series of questions I have people imagine that fear is give a voice to fear and have them write dialogues with it and talk back to fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, what I do is I actually help them also identify what the corresponding growing edge would be. So let's say they'd identify that they want more courage. So I have them do writing exercises. In fact, I could read one.
We have to take a break. And so what I'd love to do is when we come back, get down to the specifics and perhaps give listeners an exercise they could do on their own. So we will be right back. We have to take a break. We'll be back with Kim Schneiderman.
Madman drums, bombers, Indians in the summer with a teenage diplomat. In the dumps with a
Do you want to transform your life's trauma and challenges into the gift that your life was meant to be? It's time for you to take control of your soul journey to heal, grow, and shine. Manifest your destiny with Wendy Wolf, soul transformer, energy, and psychic healer. To start your soul journey, contact Wendy at healgrowshine.com or email Wendy at wendy@wendyrwolf.com and start your adventure today.
Join the Pacific Northwest EFT Tappers at the 5th Annual Tappers Gathering, March 14th at Bastyr University, and have a chance to meet EFT founder Gary Craig. This event raises money for continuing EFT tapping scientific research. Bring your cards and information for a full day of networking and inspiration. Visit www.newtp.org nwtappersgathering.com or call 360-661-6877.
If you're one of the millions of Americans suffering from anxiety, you probably know how powerless and out of control this emotion can make you feel. This is why it is so important to remember that anxiety is created by your mind, which means that you can learn to use your mind to uncreate it. Hello, my name is Dr. Friedman Schaub. My award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution, provides you with a step-by-step breakthrough process to understand and resolve the root causes of your anxiety and build a solid foundation of confidence and inner peace. If you are ready to take your power back, visit thefearandanxietysolution.com. That's thefearandanxietysolution.com or call 866-903-6463. That's 866-903-MIND.
Welcome back, everyone, to We Carry the Light, and I am Dr. Susan, and my guest is Kim Schneiderman, and she's talking about her wonderful book, Step Out of Your Story. And before the break, we were talking a bit about the antagonist, and you are the protagonist, and you are the main character, and you're writing this story first and third person, which is saying she or he, but there always is some conflict in a plot. And there is an antagonist or more than one. So I wonder, Kim, if you could talk a little more about the antagonist and sort of the purpose of that and how we deal with that antagonist, if it's a real person or something within us.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, every story has a conflict. And a lot of us, we don't like that word, and we'll go out of our way, to avoid them. But the truth is that in life, there's always, there's things that challenge us, things that show up in our story that challenge us to grow in new ways. And that conflict, that tension, that necessary friction between the status quo of our life and whatever's coming up that's challenging us is a necessary and important part of the story. So I like to people to isolate the antagonist of the current chapter of their story, and that can be a person or a situation that they're up against. I have it very loosely defined. So for some people, it might be somebody that they really don't like or that they don't get along with, and but they have to negotiate with. But it could also be a person that you really love, or a situation that's positive, that's pushing you to sort of grow in a new direction in your life. I often like to talk about the book itself as being my antagonist, because it forced me, as someone who has always had a lot of ideas and was a little bit of a dreamer, to really ground my ideas and be disciplined about and clear about explaining them, and pushing, and just constantly, I talk about how it's constantly pushing me to stretch and grow into the kind of character that could write a book and speak on the radio, which is something I've never done before. So antagonists can be, I loosely define them as whatever situation is showing up in your story and forcing you to use muscles that you don't normally use. So when you're in that particular kind of situation, let's say you're working on, give me an example. Let's have a challenge.
Can I give you one?
Sure.
All right. I just discovered as you're talking that one of my antagonists is my husband's death. So my husband passed away almost 2 years ago. And whether it's my grief and my pain and my suffering or his actual death has caused me to grow tremendously, but it's also adversarial on some level.
Okay. So tell me,
difficult.
So tell me more. Can you tell me more about what's the adverse? I mean, first of all, I'm so sorry. That's so.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been a very, very tough couple years, especially the first year. I'm a little better, but it's been really hard. So, you said about adversarial. What it is that I'm so, at times, angry that he's gone and miss him terribly. And I don't really want to be here on some days. And so that there's this, and there's this, I just wrote a poem about it, about this anger that flares up, and it's not anger at the driver that almost hits me, although that wasn't pleasant. It's not anger at my animals that I sometimes am yelling at, but I am upset that he is gone, that he's not only gone from the town, the country, he's gone from the planet, and he isn't coming back. And underneath that is deep, deep grief. And because I love him. And another guest on my show said, part of your suffering is you're in love with someone who's dead. Mm-hmm. And that really, started reframing and change. Yeah, it was really powerful. And I started, she's a therapist also in New York. And she really helped me see, wow, talk about suffering when you're in love with someone that isn't coming back.
Yeah.
So that I think is sort of an antagonist for me.
Right. So first of all, there's definitely a place for grief in everyone's story. Yeah. And my writing exercises don't. Sometimes they'll tell me that they think it sounds a little Pollyannish that you can find the redemptive narrative in any story, but it's not about skipping over the grief, because I think that's really important. And as a therapist that anger is part of the grief process.
Yeah.
It's not getting stuck in it. That's the challenge.
Yes.
So how do you? So if you were to step out of your story, I would ask you kind of first of all, if you were reading about your life in a novel, and this was the current chapter, how would you want to see the character of your story evolve in response to the situation? I would want to know, what vulnerabilities was it exposing? Every antagonist in our story exposes parts of ourselves that are really raw, and that's okay. Yes. I think Brene Brown's been a wonderful advocate of helping people embrace their vulnerabilities. So I want to help you understand, what is it exposing for you? And you don't have to get into it now, and I don't think we have enough time.
No.
But, what is it bringing up for you? And then I also would help you identify what resources, what strengths do you bring to this process? Obviously, you're very creative, right? And you obviously have the skills that have helped you develop this radio show. So I'd have you look at the bigger picture, that you have these incredible internal resources and external resources. I'd have you identify the supporting characters who are helping you through this experience that you were leading on. And then I would help you maybe write a dialogue, for example, for every vulnerability. Let's say it's fear. I think you brought that up before. Mm-hmm. I would help you look at the opposite of fear would be courage. So have you write a dialogue, for example, that helps you tap into the courageous voice that's underneath all of this. Or if you have anger, I would have you identify, what would you maybe coming to some sort of what would be the opposite of anger for you? Where would you want to grow from the anger? Where would you want the character to end up once they've gone through this process of anger?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I really love, and I don't want to spoil it for readers, I do want you to get this book, but there's a great exercise at the end. I love that, where you really have us write out the chapter, what it's about, the conflicts. You have it all there, and I love that. And I think that you could take that as a template, and just keep writing chapters.
Right. So, for example, just as an example, I can read, if I have time. Do I have time to read a quick dialogue, just to give people an example of what a dialogue?
We have about 3 minutes.
Okay. So sometimes I have people write a dialogue with the kind of energy or character strengths that they want to cultivate in their life through their experience. So, for example, if you want to create more courage in your life, I would help you. First, I offer some guiding questions. How can I access more of you? What gets in the way of making you a bigger part of my life? Where are you hiding, and how do I get you to come out and play? So here's an example of how somebody did a courage exercise. I'm going to read it as a dialogue, like a play. Mm-hmm. So the protagonist says, "Courage, how can I access more of you?" Courage says, "First, know that I'm inside you, have always been there since you took your first little baby steps." Protagonist, "But why do I have trouble finding you?" Courage, "Fear made you think that I had gone away, but I lay nestled like a lion under your security blanket, waiting for you to pull the covers off and exclaim, "Let's go, it's time to take a stroll through the jungle." The protagonist says, "Ha ha, you have a great sense of humor, Courage. Wish I could find the humor when I'm in my fearful place. Life seems so serious, and like every choice I make has monstrous consequences." Courage says, "The monster is not the consequence, the monster is the fear." The protagonist says, "Yes, but it feels so big." And Courage says, "So shrink it down and put it in its proper place. If you can be slightly more courageous than you're afraid, you'll be in good shape. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." The idea here is to really access the voices of courage, to access the voices of acceptance, for example. Like with anger, get angry when things aren't turning out the way we hope them to be. But we could maybe look at how this is, looking at your life, how this is stretching you to become to blossom into this creative, expressive person who's coming out with a book and doing a radio show and entering this new chapter of her life, and still grieving, because there's a place in your story for grief, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And then maybe for the dialogue exercise, you might choose something like acceptance. Where are you? Why can't I get to you? How do I have more of you? Or faith. It might be faith.
Yep.
Faith. You might do a dialogue with faith. How can I have more of you in my life? Where are you hiding? Where did you go? So it's an idea, not unlike the new movie Inside Out, of giving voice to these different qualities and engaging in dialogues and finding that oftentimes these voices are hidden underneath. The voices of courage are hidden underneath the voices of fear, and we just need to reach down deep enough into ourselves to find them. And what my exercises try to do is help people access those voices. And then the climax exercise, which is one of the ones I'm most proud of, is where you actually give yourself the blessing that you're seeking from your antagonist. Because sometimes people feel like they want, if they're, for example, going through a divorce or they want somebody, their ex-husband or whatever, to say, "You were right, I screwed up," and maybe that might never happen. But but oftentimes, really, in order to ask for a blessing from somebody else, you have to know that you deserve it. Mm-hmm. So I have an exercise where people basically they bless themselves. They give themselves the blessing that they want to hear from their antagonist, so that regardless of how your story folds, you're in the driver's seat. And you can feel good, you can feel like I can give this to myself, even if I can't get it from somebody else. And ultimately, that helps us to move on, and to help us to feel empowered in the way that we co-author our story.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I have to take a break, but we're going to be right back with Kim Schneiderman.
Get ready to embrace your feminine nature and get wild. Join Lynn Brown and Wendy R. Wolf for the Wild Transformation Retreat this July 26th through August 1st. Get ready for a mental, physical, and spiritual challenge. A call back to nature and its unlimited gifts. To learn more and register for the early bird price by July 1st, visit areyouintoit.com. That's letter R, letter U, intoit.com.
Holistic Medical Center is where you find it all. A healthy space with doctors who care, see, and listen to the whole you. Hi, this is Dr. Darvish. If you have not found an answer to your chronic symptoms, you will find answers here at Holistic Medical Center. Our doctors find the root cause of your symptoms and guide your body towards healing naturally. We transform lives from within. Visit drdarvish.com or call 425-451-0404.
On the cutting edge of the new mainstream, Christine Upchurch is passionate about bringing together science, psychology, and spirituality in a way that can be applied to our everyday lives for true transformation. The Christine Upchurch Show. Stellar conversations to illuminate your journey. Engages some of the most outstanding visionaries on the planet in lively dialogue to inspire you to become that bright light you're meant to be. Join Christine every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time on KKNW, AM 1150, and Transformation Talk Radio.
Tune in each Tuesday at noon Pacific and 3 Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com for The Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected with Dr. Julie Kroll, featuring weekly segments with David Eisen and the Chakra Sound System. Each week, you will journey through infinite possibilities, expand into social potential, and find beautiful beginnings where endings leave off. Changemakers from around the world will explore what's emergent about the environment, relationships, health, the arts, education, and the evolution of consciousness. Visit thedrjulieshow.com.
Do you feel stuck with fear and anxiety? Have you tried everything to get rid of these emotions, but nothing seemed to work? Hi, I'm Dr. Friedman Schaub. My Breakthrough and Empowerment program has helped thousands of people to overcome fear and anxiety and build a new foundation of confidence and inner peace. Join me for my next Breakthrough video seminar and learn how you can transform your life in less than 3 months. Visit thefearandanxietysolution.com.
Chris Stanis is a spiritual leader and healer and teaches a course on how you can transform your life through a meditation and healing system that will manifest your spirit's dreams. She manifested the Women of Wisdom Conference, the Women of Wisdom book, and this radio show. And she can show you how to change your life too. Are you ready? Visit the website and contact her at voicesofwomentoday.com. That's voicesofwomentoday.com.
If I needed a ride.
Welcome back, everyone, to We Carry the Light. I'm Dr. Susan, and I have a fantastic guest with me, Kim Schneiderman, and talking about her book, which I absolutely love. I want you all to go out and get it. It's Step Out of Your Story, Writing Exercises to Reframe and Transform Your Life, and it's already helping me. So before we go any further, Kim, would you tell people how to get your book and how to contact you?
Sure. You can get my book. You can go to my website at stepoutofyourstory.com. And on there, there's ways to order the book through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and also New World Library, which is my publisher. I have a Facebook page, Step Out of Your Story, so people can feel free to like my Facebook page. I am also going to be doing a book signing in Emeryville, California, near Oakland, at Barnes & Noble on Thursday, July 30th at 7 p.m. And if you are in the New York area in October 25th, I will be teaching a writing workshop at the JCC of Manhattan. And I think that's about it. You can follow me on Twitter at StepOutStory.
Awesome. Wonderful. And you just got an email from somebody who wants to know how to get your book.
Yes, I did. And you can go onto my website because there's two ways you can do it through Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And apparently they want me to make sure that both of them are mentioned.
Wonderful. Of course they do.
Yes.
Yes. And, as writers, we just want to write our book and help people write and see clients. And the whole marketing, that whole piece is not usually our forte.
Right.
So
it's a learning curve. It's part of our character. It's part of my character arc right now.
Yes.
We're talking about the evolution and how things change. And so we're always learning and acquiring new skills by every opportunity that we have.
I agree. And I am being stretched like you are in terms of social media and so forth. And it's the new world that we're part of. Yep. So you asked during the break if I'd mentioned sort of my aha from the last segment of the show. And you were talking about anger, and we were trying to figure out the opposite. And what I realized is I get into this emotional state, and what's under it is hurt, and then underneath that, just some sadness and some love that I miss and that I have. But also we talked about faith. You said the word faith, and I'm going to do my dialogue with trust and faith, and ask how I can have more trust, because some of it is just basically fear of walking this path by myself and feeling like an orphan.
And I resonate with that just on a personal level. I know
you do, because you mentioned the orphan word earlier, and I went and I had sort of like an intake of breath, and I went, yep, I get that.
Yeah.
I get it. So talk some more just about the benefits of your book or what people can gain from it. And we talked about the antagonist. I think that's really clear now. Right. You know, one thing that someone asked me about, because I brought it and showed it to a client, do people have to be like brilliant writers to do this?
Absolutely not. Actually, the goal is, it's really about using writing as a tool of self-discovery. In fact, I was interviewed earlier this week, and somebody said, I was a little confused about the subtitle because of your book, which is Writing Exercise to Reframe and Transform Your Life, because it's really not so much about the writing. It's about the reframing. But however, that being said, the writing is an important tool because writing allows us to experience and express ourselves in ways that talking often doesn't, or even thinking doesn't. It really crystallizes and enables us to get more in touch with our own experience. But the writing isn't really the point. You don't have to be a master. I'm not looking for a masterpiece of writing. It's really about using it as a tool to create a masterpiece of living.
Yeah.
And so it's really, they're designed for anybody that can compose a simple sentence. In fact, sometimes I tell people, if you write like an 8th grader, if that's your most primitive voice, if that's the voice that you tap into when you're writing about yourself, and that helps you to get in touch with your story, then embrace it. And you don't have to share it. You can write it in a journal. You don't have to share it with anybody. And in the end of the book, though, because I use the elements of the story, as an architecture to deconstruct and then reassemble your story. So at the end of the book, I have like a 2-page, it almost looks like 2 pages of it looks like an old Mad Lib book, where it explains, it takes your story apart element by element, and then you plug in the kernel of insight that you learned in each of the chapters of my book, and you plug it in to a new story about the current chapter of your life that you could tack on your refrigerator or carry around with you. So it's I'm actually helping people to create if you do all the exercises in order and they're designed in a specific way that's step by step by step, walking through your story. And in the end, you actually end up with a new 2-page synopsis of what you're kind of to focus you and help and use as a guide for further navigating your life. And I even have people envision, once they've kind of worked through the current chapter of their life, to envision what their epilogue would look like, which is the next chapter of their life. What would it look like for you? What do you imagine the current title of it would be, and what would be happening to the main character to get people sort of thinking about the future. And that can also be helpful for people, to think about, to start envisioning the direction that they want to move.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask you about that, and you brought it up, which is predicting the future. But really, we all have dreams. We all have aspirations, and we daydream. We think about, where's my life going? What would I really, really like? And I like that idea of writing a bit anyway about your next chapter.
Yeah. And also what I have at the end of the book, for those of the people who are really ambitious, and actually this can help people that want to write their memoir, or as a friend of mine who works in hospice as a social worker, she said it's great for a life review process.
Yep.
I have people a chart where people can go through, I've broken it down by defining your chapters in terms of decades, and for each decade you describe what was the title of that chapter. What were the themes of the chapter? Who were the supporting characters? What were you, how did you grow as a character? And what was, who was your antagonist? And kind of what were the learning? What did you learn? So I have people have an opportunity to look at their larger story, which I think, as someone told me who was into writing memoir, would be a great structure to use to do that kind of thing.
Yep. No, I like that part at the end. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to. We are out of time, Kim. That's why I always say I need a couple hours with everyone. It's been so nice having you on my show. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. And gosh, thank you, my wonderful listeners, for being willing to reframe your story and reclaim your life. Next week, we have Yasmina Arrigo Shure to help us overcome adversity, challenges in our life, which we all have. So until then, this is Dr. Susan reminding you that you carry the light.
You've been listening to the transformative show, We Carry the Light, with host Dr. Susan Allison, the show that inspires you to find the light within and shine your light in the world. Who are you right now, and who do you want to be? What is it that makes you happy, helps you feel fulfilled, and living your purpose? Tune in every Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, and let Dr. Susan help you discover that you carry the unique light that only you can shine.